The Emperor's Last Sorcerer Part 2. Chapter 10. The Scroll of Names. They hid in the roots of the mountain. Aelia led Cassius through a narrow crevice just as the chariot of Vale Acros crested the ridge behind them. The sound of bone hooves and grinding wheels faded into the wind as they slid into the dark. Below the surface, the earth opened into a hidden chamber, carved not by hands, but by memory. Its walls rippled faintly with ancient magic, lit by no flame and yet never fully dark. Here, even silence had a sound. Cassius moved slowly, touching the walls as he walked. The stone pulsed under his fingers, like skin. "This place is alive," he said. "It remembers," Aelia corrected. They entered a circular hall. At its center stood a tall pedestal carved from black stone, wrapped in metal bands that pulsed faintly with blue light. Hovering above the pedestal, suspended in nothing, was a scroll. Long, coiled, bound by a wax seal glowing with the thorn-wrapped eye. Aelia bowed her head. "The Scroll of Names," she whispered. "Every person ever marked by the gate. Every bearer. Every betrayer. Every witness." Cassius stared at it, breath caught in his throat. "Why is it here?" "Because you were never meant to find it," she said. "Only to be found by it." He stepped forward. The air grew heavier with every inch. The moment his hand touched the scroll, the seal cracked. A burst of wind surged outward. The walls pulsed. The symbols carved in the stone flared to life, an ancient alphabet older than Latin, moving like serpents across the surface. The scroll unrolled in the air. One name at a time burned into existence. First in red, then fading to black. Severus Aemilianus, the first witness. Valeria Nastra, bound flame. Talmarin of the third seal, the forgotten flame. Aelia Varron, pact bearer of fire. Vale Acros, the betrayer. Cassius Varro, the 13th witness. The final name glowed brighter than all the others. Then it burned. Black at the edges. "Why is my name doing that?" Cassius asked, stepping back. "Because the scroll doesn't record the living," Aelia said slowly. "It remembers the dead." Cassius looked at her, stunned. "You mean? It believes you've already died. Or that you are dying again." A new name began to form. But it didn't appear in red. It appeared in white, a color none of the others bore. The name was unfinished. Letters still forming. Lucius Varro, the silent flame. Cassius felt his heart seize. "That's my brother's name." "You said you had no siblings," Aelia whispered. "I didn't. My mother lost him in childbirth. He never breathed." He stared at the scroll, hands shaking. "Why is he on this list?" "Because memory doesn't care about breath," she said softly. "Only about binding. If he bore your blood, he bore the gate's mark. Stillborn or not." Cassius took a step back, the walls spinning around him. "This isn't a record. It's a warning." "It's more than that," Aelia said. She reached up, and from the scroll, a second coil began to unfurl. Smaller. Older. Cracked along the edges like dry skin. It bore only 7 names. Each marked with a seal. Aelia's name was among them. "The seal-bearers," she said. "The last line of defense." Each one tied to a tomb. But one name glowed brighter than the others. It was written in reverse lettering, meant to be read in a mirror. Aurelius Varro. Cassius blinked. "That's my grandfather. He died before I was born." Aelia stepped back, visibly shaken. "Then your family has always been tied to this?" "From the beginning." Cassius stared at the glowing names. His own. His brother's. His grandfather's. Each tied to the gate. To the fire. To the witnesses' line. We weren't just part of history, he said. We were its weapon. Suddenly, the scroll shuddered. The pedestal cracked. The air turned icy. A deep voice echoed from the walls. You were never meant to read this, child of fire. Now memory will burn you clean. The scroll ignited, flames curling up its sides. Aelia grabbed Cassius's arm. We have to go. Now. But the names? They already remember you. The flames chased them as they ran, walls screaming, glyphs shattering, the scroll turning to ash that whispered every name it had ever known. And as they reached the tunnel's edge, Cassius heard it again. A name not spoken aloud. Not written on the scroll. But carved into his blood. You are not the last. Chapter 11, The Road to Thrace. The wind carried ashes eastward. Cassius and Aelia rode hard through the ghost-haunted valleys of Illyricum, cloaked as travelers, but marked by things no cloak could hide. Cassius still felt the heat of the scroll against his skin, though it had turned to ash. The names whispered in his dreams now, some he recognized. Others he feared he would meet soon. Why Thrace? He asked on the fourth night of their journey. What's there? The second tomb, Aelia replied. The tomb of the thrice-damned. It was sealed beneath the city of Beroia, long before the Empire renamed it. Before even the gods walked freely. Cassius looked to the horizon. Black forests lined the road like teeth. A storm was gathering behind the hills, but the air was dry, too dry. What damned it 3 times? First by war, she said. Then by magic. Then by the one they buried beneath it. They crossed rivers where the water ran backward. They passed shrines where birds refused to perch. And always, always, they were watched. Not by soldiers. Not by men. But by statues. Old ones? Faces with hollow eyes that hadn't crumbled, hadn't faded. Faces that turned just enough to follow them when they passed. Cassius didn't speak of it. Aelia already knew. This road was once called the Path of Echoes, she said, breaking their silence one dusk. Because here, memory doesn't fade, it walks. Ghosts? Worse. Truths. That night they camped in a clearing near a ruined outpost, stone walls half consumed by ivy, a single marble column cracked clean down the center. Cassius found a moment of quiet, standing apart from the fire, staring into the dark woods. And then, a whisper. Cassius. He turned. Nothing. Then again, closer. Cassius Varro. Come remember me. A shadow emerged from the trees. It was a boy. No more than 10. Pale, barefoot, wearing tattered robes stitched with moon thread. Cassius's blood turned to ice. Lucius? The boy looked up, eyes glowing faintly with a white-blue fire. You left me, the boy whispered. You never lived, Cassius said softly, heart hammering. You never even drew breath. Then why do I dream of fire? The boy asked. Why do I remember the gate? Cassius took a step forward, and the boy blinked out of existence. Only ash remained, blown by wind that hadn't been there a moment before. Aelia approached from behind. You saw him. He spoke. Then the gate has claimed his memory, she said. Even the unborn are not beyond its reach. Cassius sat heavily on a stone, staring at his hands. How do you fight something that remembers more of your life than you do? Aelia knelt beside him. You don't fight memory. You anchor yourself to something real. Someone. She looked at him. If we lose who we are, the gate wins. By the next morning, the weather had changed. Thunder rolled low across the hills. And before them, rising like a wound in the earth, stood the broken towers of ancient Beroia. Aelia paused atop a ridge. This is where it happened. Where the Severian circle tried to burn out the second lock. Cassius looked down on the city. The ruins were vast, swallowed by moss and time. Walls tilted at impossible angles. Roads looped back upon themselves. And at the center stood an obsidian spire, its top shattered, but still pulsing with red light. Something's alive down there. Not alive, Aelia said. Remembering. As they began their descent, a rider approached from the north, cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a bronze mask etched with both Severan and Imperial sigils. The rider stopped at the edge of the hill. Cassius and Aelia turned. Friend of yours? He asked. No, she said. But I know who she is. She? Her name is Lisa Dravarn. They called her the Grave Listener. That doesn't sound encouraging. She was once the Emperor's archivist of forbidden knowledge. Until she listened too closely and the gate marked her ears. The rider raised a hand. From her palm, black birds erupted, silent, burning, flickering like shadow flame. They flew straight for Cassius. Run! Aelia shouted. They fled into the ruins of Beroia, the wind howling with names neither of them had ever spoken. Behind them, the birds gave chase, not cawing, not screaming, but chanting. Varro. 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 As if they weren't calling his name, but practicing it. They reached the shattered spire just as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The red light pulsed stronger now. The earth trembled beneath their feet. Aelia raised her hand, and the Severan flame ignited along her skin. This is it, she said. The second seal lies beneath this tower. And so does something else, Cassius murmured, eyes fixed on the stone. He didn't know how he knew. But he was certain of one thing. Someone was waiting for them below. Not just a guardian. Not just a name. But the one who remembered him before he ever lived. Chapter 12: The Voice in the Flame. The entrance to the second tomb wasn't hidden, it was daring them to enter. At the base of the broken spire in Beroia stood a stone archway carved with faces, each one cracked, screaming, or blindfolded. The opening was rimmed with runes burned deep into the rock, still faintly glowing red, as if freshly carved despite the centuries. The air that poured out from the threshold was warm, unnaturally so. Not with fire, but with breath. Aelia reached toward the runes, her palm igniting with Severan flame. The symbols flared in recognition, then quieted, folding inward as the doorway groaned open. It remembers me, she said. I'm not sure that's comforting, Cassius muttered, stepping inside. The passage descended in perfect spirals, far older than Roman construction. The walls were smooth, not carved but melted, as though fire had shaped the very stone. Torches were not needed. The path was lit by veins of glowing ember rock, pulsing slowly like the beat of a buried heart. This was once a temple, Aelia whispered. Not to a god, but to something the Severan Circle feared too much to name. And they built the tomb here? Cassius asked. No, she replied. They trapped it here. The one who remembered too much. The spiral ended in a vast, circular chamber, completely black, save for a single pillar of fire rising from the floor. It didn't flicker. It stood still, unnaturally vertical and unmoving, like a sculpture made of pure flame. Cassius stepped forward, drawn to it. This is the seal? No, Aelia said. This is the voice of the seal. She gestured around them. The tomb is beneath. But this flame, it's the mouthpiece of what's bound inside. Cassius took another step, and the flame shimmered. Then it spoke. Not aloud. Not with sound. But inside his chest, behind his thoughts, like memory cracking through bone. Cassius Varro. He stopped breathing. You have returned. I've never been here. You have. But you were not you. Cassius's vision blurred. He was standing in the same chamber, but now the flames danced, wild and free. Around him were figures in ancient robes, chanting in a circle, their voices rising as the flame twisted into shapes, faces, hands, eyes. One of them turned. It was him. Older. Robed. Marked. Eyes glowing gold. The vision shattered. Cassius fell to his knees, gasping. What did it show you? Aelia asked, grabbing his shoulders. Myself, he whispered. But not me. Someone older. Someone the fire knew. The flame shimmered again. A voice, lower this time, more insistent. You are the Echo reborn. The memory returned. You opened the gate once. Will you open it again? Cassius stood, defiant. No. I'm here to stop it. You cannot stop what is written in the bones of the world. The flame flared outward, and revealed something. A structure beneath the flame, a sarcophagus of obsidian glass. Inside it, suspended in amber light, was a body. Not rotting. Not alive. Sleeping. That's the thrice damned, Aelia said. The one whose memory is fragmented across 3 lives. Sorcerer. Betrayer. Witness. Cassius stepped closer. The body in the glass looked familiar. Too familiar. It's me, he whispered. No, Aelia said, her voice breaking. It's who you were. The one the Severan Circle couldn't kill. So they shattered your mind, erased your name, and rewrote you into the Varro line. Why? Because you remembered too much. The flame pulsed again. Open the tomb. Let us finish what we began. Cassius reached out instinctively, but Aelia grabbed his arm. Don't listen. But if I was this person, if I open the gate, maybe I can undo it. That's what it wants, she hissed. It knows you're not ready. Cassius looked into the flame. Then what do we do? Aelia stepped forward, drew her dagger, and cut her palm. She let the blood drop into the flame. It screamed. The chamber shook. The seal beneath the flame lit up, a circle of runes, glowing brighter and brighter, until the sarcophagus vanished beneath shifting light. We reinforced the seal, she said. Buy time. Delay the next awakening. Cassius watched the flame flicker, shrinking slowly. Then it whispered one last time. You cannot hide from yourself, Cassius. The gate is not a door. It is a mirror. And then the fire was gone. The chamber fell into silence. Only their breath remained. Cassius turned to Aelia. If I've lived other lives, if I've opened the gate before. He swallowed. Then who am I really? She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. You are the end. Or the one who remembers how to stop it. Outside the tomb, the storm had finally broken. Lightning lit the ruins of Beroia. And across the broken earth, someone was watching. A figure in torn robes. Eyes white. A thorn brand glowing on his chest. Vale Acros had arrived. And he had remembered enough. Chapter 13, Betrayal in the Ruins. The storm shattered the sky above Beroia. Lightning crawled across the black clouds like veins of fire. The crumbling towers wept with rain, and the old stones of the forgotten city drank it like blood. Cassius and Aelia emerged from the tomb entrance beneath the broken spire, both exhausted, both changed. The fire was gone. The second seal had been reinforced, for now. We should move, Aelia said, gripping her cloak against the wind. That much power leaves a scent. Cassius nodded, though he barely heard her. His eyes remained locked on the horizon, where twisted shadows moved just beyond the broken archways of the ancient city. Someone's already here. They descended into the lower streets, narrow alleys choked with ivy, broken cisterns, and warped statues of gods long erased from history. The storm had not yet touched the streets. That was the first warning. No rain, Cassius whispered. Because he's holding it back, Aelia said. He's near. Cassius opened his mouth to ask who. And then the wind stopped. And so did the world. A figure stepped through the veil of stillness, his footsteps silent. He wore a long coat of black scale-stitched leather, a tattered crimson cloak dragging behind him like smoke, and a half-broken bronze mask shaped like a jackal's skull. Around his chest glowed a thorn-eye sigil, cracked and bleeding light. Vale Ache rose. Cassius, he said, voice warm and terrible. At last. Cassius froze. There was no mistaking it. Vale's presence wasn't human, it pressed against the world like a wound that refused to close. You're the one who betrayed the circle, Aelia said, stepping between them. You broke your seal. You let the memory beasts in. Vale's eyes flashed behind the mask. No. I freed them. They were never beasts. They were fragments of the first truth. He stepped closer. And you, Cassius, how does it feel? To carry so many echoes inside you that you don't know which one is yours? Cassius clenched his fists. What do you want? Vale spread his arms. The gate. Opened, not feared. Not locked behind burned names and broken tombs. Don't you see? You are the final pattern. The 13th flame. The key that was never supposed to remember, but does. Cassius felt the sigil on his chest begin to burn beneath his tunic. I'm not your key. Vale smiled beneath the mask. No. You're something better. He raised a hand. From the shadows behind him, they came. Not soldiers. Not men. The hollow-bound. Figures wrapped in ancient robes, faces twisted and empty, mouths sewn shut with golden wire, their hands branded with symbols of memory, eyes, flames, mirrors. They were once like you, Vale said. Witnesses. Sealbearers. Lovers of truth. What happened to them? Aelia demanded. They remembered everything. Lightning struck behind the ruins, illuminating the sky. Aelia turned to Cassius. We run. But he didn't move. His vision had changed. He wasn't in Beroya anymore. He was standing in another city, on another night, beside Vale Acros, both of them younger, wearing Severan robes, standing before the first tomb. Vale turned to him, smiling. Promise me, Cassius. If I fall, you'll finish it. Cassius blinked, and he was back. You knew me, he said, stunned. In a past life. Vale tilted his head. I still do. You told me to stop you. Vale nodded. And now you can't. Aelia lunged forward, her dagger blazing with flame, but Vale moved like smoke. He caught her wrist, twisted, and flung her against the wall with brutal grace. She crashed into a fallen statue, dazed. Cassius moved without thinking. The pendant Aelia had given him, the Severan moon wrapped in thorns, flared in his hand. A ring of fire exploded around him, forcing the hollowbound to recoil. Vale stepped forward unharmed. You're awakening faster than I expected. That's good. You'll need your full memory soon. For what? Vale removed his mask. His face was burned, half flesh, half ash, with eyes that glowed like the gate itself. To remember what you did to the world. Aelia groaned and stood, blood dripping from her forehead. Cassius. The third seal. He's going there. Where? To the Emperor's reliquary. Vale smiled. There lies the crown. The one who wore it, and the one who still does. Aelia raised her dagger again, but Vale vanished in a gust of smoke, the hollowbound fading with him, as if erased by the rain finally beginning to fall. Only his voice remained, echoing through the storm. The gate remembers its king, Cassius. Do you? Cassius and Aelia stood in the rain, soaked, bruised, and quiet. He's faster than us, she said. Not if I remember first, Cassius whispered. That could kill you. Then I'll die knowing who I really am. She looked at him, eyes filled with something between fear and loyalty. Then we go north, she said. To the Emperor's reliquary. What's there? She paused. Your memory. Chapter 14. The Seal of Bone and Iron. The northern road led through dead forests where the trees no longer grew leaves, and the ravens no longer sang. Cassius and Aelia traveled in silence for 2 days, their horses gone, their wounds hidden beneath cloaks damp from rain and ash. Neither spoke of Vale Acros. Neither spoke of the vision that had passed between them, the memory that implied Cassius was once the architect of the gate. But silence, like memory, had its limits. The reliquary was supposed to be destroyed, Aelia said at last, as they reached a ravine flanked by cracked statues of wingless angels. Then why wasn't it? Cassius asked. Because you built it. Hidden deep in the jagged cliffs of Thracia, the reliquary had been carved directly into the bones of the mountain. Its entrance was framed by black pillars etched with imperial glyphs long since banned, marks that twisted and changed when viewed from the corner of the eye. The twin gates were sealed with iron bands threaded through bone. Not animal bone. Human. Cassius stared at the inscriptions on the outer seal. These runes, they're in my handwriting. Not yours, Aelia whispered. Your past self. The gatekeeper. He carved them with a memory-forging blade. That's why they still bleed. Cassius pressed his palm to the iron. It hissed, then shifted, accepting him like an heir returning to an ancestral tomb. The gates opened. Inside was darkness, not the absence of light, but the presence of something waiting. The air tasted like rust and forgotten prayers. They descended a narrow staircase into the depths of the reliquary, the sound of their footsteps muffled by ancient dust and something more oppressive, a silence that had been engineered. This place was built to erase sound, Aelia said softly. So the things sealed here would forget their names. You mean relics? And memories. And voices. And people. The inner chamber was a vast circular vault with 7 alcoves carved into the walls. In each alcove sat an artifact on a pedestal, each one covered by a veil of silver-threaded cloth. Aelia stopped before the 3rd alcove. This is the one. She reached out and slowly pulled back the cloth. Beneath it sat a crown. It was made of twisted bone and iron, shaped like a ring of thorns with a broken sigil at the center. But it pulsed faintly, like a living thing. Cassius felt something awaken in his chest. I've seen this before. You wore it, Aelia said. When you first opened the gate. He reached for it, and the moment his fingers brushed the iron, the reliquary shuddered. His vision went white. And then, he stood in a throne room of smoke and fire. Statues of forgotten gods lined the walls, all broken at the neck. At the center, a throne carved from living obsidian. On it sat a man in the crown of bone and iron. Cassius. Older. Crueler. Eyes ringed in black flame. And before him knelt the Severan circle, bowed in chains, their faces burned with glyphs of obedience. Memory is power, the past Cassius said. And I will never forget again. He raised his hand, and the gate opened in the sky above the throne, a spiral of gold and blood swallowing the stars. He was a tyrant, Cassius whispered. I was. You were what the Emperor feared, Aelia said. Back in the reliquary, Cassius stumbled back, the crown still in his hand. Why did I build this place? To hide the truth. To bury the crown. And to trap the only memory strong enough to destroy you. Cassius turned. In the final alcove, another cloth had begun to smolder. Smoke curled around it. The air grew colder. It's waking up, Aelia said. Cassius approached the last veil and pulled it back. There was no artifact. Only a mirror, circular, obsidian, rimmed in bone, and filled not with reflection, but with a man. His own face. But older. Burned. Watching him from inside the glass. "Hello, Cassius," the reflection said, lips not moving. "Who are you? The part you left behind. The memory you were too afraid to carry." "I am what remains." The mirror rippled. "Take the crown, and I'll tell you the rest." "No," Aelia said quickly. "Don't listen. That's not a memory. It's a prison." But Cassius didn't move. The man in the mirror looked at him with something that wasn't anger. It was recognition. "We are not enemies," the voice said. "We are the only thing that can stop what comes next." "And what comes next?" The voice leaned forward. "The Emperor still lives." Suddenly, the walls cracked. The sigils on the gate began to burn red-hot. The reliquary was collapsing. Aelia grabbed Cassius's hand. "We have to go. Now." "But the crown. It's already part of you." She pulled him through the tunnel as stones shattered behind them. The mirror shattered with a scream that wasn't made of sound but memory. They barely escaped as the reliquary collapsed into dust. Outside, the wind howled. Cassius looked down at his hand. The crown was gone. But around his wrist, a new mark had appeared. A ring of thorns, etched in flame. Aelia touched it gently. "You awakened something," she said. "Something even the Emperor feared. You said he was dead." She looked at the horizon. "I said he should be. But if Vale Acros is right, then there's only one place left to go." "Where?" She met his gaze. "To the tomb of the Emperor himself. Before he awakens the third seal." Chapter 15. The awakening begins. The skies above the Empire cracked. Clouds spun in a slow spiral of gold and rust. Lightning no longer struck in forks, but in circles. Farmers whispered of wolves walking upright. Children stopped dreaming. And in the high towers of the Red Legion, the seers screamed until their tongues turned to ash. They all knew the signs. The third seal was stirring. And the one who had worn the crown of bone and iron had begun to wake. Cassius and Aelia stood on the windswept heights above the Valley of Tombs, the peaks of the Illyrian mountains at their back. In the distance, barely visible through the rising mist, stood the ruined mausoleum once called the Sepulchre Imperial, a structure swallowed by history and renamed across centuries as a place of blasphemy. "That's where he sleeps?" Cassius asked. "Not sleeps," Aelia whispered. "Waits." They descended quickly, navigating the jagged switchbacks and crumbling paths. With every step, Cassius's wrist ached beneath the thorn mark. With every breath, his thoughts became less his own. He remembered fragments of the man in the mirror. Fragments of a throne built in fire. Of a voice raised against the gods. And the worst part was, it didn't feel wrong. They passed the remains of a Severian outpost, burned long ago. The walls had been melted, not collapsed, and a single sigil remained untouched on the gate, a circle with 13 eyes, one missing. "The 13th flame," Cassius murmured. "You," Aelia said. "You were the seal they couldn't place. Because I ran. Because they made you forget." The sepulchre loomed ahead. It was shaped like a wheel, half buried in the earth, rimmed with blackened pillars and crowned by a fractured dome. At its center stood a statue of an emperor with no name, his face smooth clean, his hand outstretched in a gesture of mercy or conquest. "The tomb was built to be forgotten," Aelia said. "No records. No inscriptions. No death date. But he isn't dead," Cassius said. She nodded once. "Because the Emperor never died. He was bound. By memory. By fire. By you." Cassius approached the statue. The moment his fingers touched the outstretched hand, the ground rumbled. A section of earth shifted, revealing stairs beneath. A black wind rose from the opening, and the torches Aelia carried dimmed. "The tomb has recognized you," she said. "We're out of time." They descended into the tomb. The stone steps were slick with condensation that smelled faintly of copper and wine. Symbols pulsed along the walls, some Severan, some older, some that moved when Cassius tried to focus on them. At the bottom, a vast chamber opened, its ceiling a perfect dome of obsidian. And at the center was a coffin carved from golden stone, chained with 7 bands of bone metal. Each one bore a different symbol. 1. A flame. 2. A mirror. 3. A name erased. 4. A bleeding crown. 5. A gate. 6. A key without a lock. 7. An eye open and cracked. Aelia stood still. "These are the 7 sins of empire," she said. "Each one formed the seal." Cassius stepped closer, feeling his heartbeat quicken. "What's inside?" "The Emperor." "No. I mean, what is he now?" She looked at him, quiet, heavy. "He was never just a man." The air shifted. One of the bone bands snapped on its own. Not broken, released. And then the coffin moved. Not much. Just enough. Cassius stumbled backward as a voice rose from within. Not like veils, not like the mirror, not like the scrolls. This voice was too large. It cracked the mind to hear it. "Cassius. My heir. My failure. My flame." Aelia screamed, clutching her head. Cassius fell to his knees. "You sealed me once. Would you do it again? Even knowing why I burned the world? You destroyed everything." Cassius gasped. "I remembered too much. And so I had to make the world forget." Another seal snapped. The room flickered. Suddenly Cassius was somewhere else. A battlefield. He stood over bodies. Soldiers. Scholars. Children. All burned. Behind him, the Emperor, not young, not old, watched as a city crumbled into dust. "They would have unmade the gate," he said. "I stopped them. I preserved what mattered." "You enslaved memory," Cassius shouted. "You burned truth." "I chose what would be remembered," the Emperor replied. "And that made me a god." Cassius returned to himself in the tomb. The third seal cracked. Light spilled from the coffin like molten silver. Aelia stood, breathing hard. "We can't stop the awakening now." "Then what do we do?" She looked at him. "We bind what we can. And we run." "Run where?" "To the last oracle." She remembers what even the gate forgot. As they fled the tomb, the wind behind them spoke in 1,000 tongues. And in the heart of the sepulchre, a figure stirred within the coffin, eyes glowing behind sealed lids, lips moving in silent remembrance. The Emperor was awakening. And he remembered Cassius perfectly. Chapter 16. The Emperor's Chamber. The path to the last oracle was carved through forgotten stone. Beneath the mountain's spine, Aelia led Cassius down a trail lost to both map and myth. It was older than the Empire, older than the Severan Circle, older even than the gate. Carved before language. Before kings. Before time was made to kneel. "The oracle dwells beyond names," Aelia whispered as they descended. "She sees what memory forgets. What we're not supposed to remember." Cassius said nothing. He still felt the echo of the Emperor's voice in his bones. The way the coffin had trembled. The weight of that awakening burned behind his eyes like a second soul. "If the Emperor lives," he finally said, "then what did we seal?" Aelia turned to him in the dark. "We sealed the truth." And gave it a face. The tunnel opened into a cathedral of silence. The oracle's chamber was carved from petrified ashwood, lined with roots that glowed faintly blue, like veins filled with starlight. A lake of glass stretched across the floor, and at its center stood a single black tree. Its branches bore no leaves. Only eyes. Dozens. Hundreds. Closed. Sleeping. Watching. The oracle does not speak in words, Aelia said, removing her cloak. She speaks in remembrance. Cassius approached the tree. Beneath its roots lay a pool, smooth and perfectly still, reflecting not their faces, but their pasts. His own reflection rippled, and changed. Now it wore the crown of bone and iron. Now it sat atop a throne of flame. Now it wept. A voice, soft and deep, echoed around the chamber. You have come far, 13th flame. From the roots of the tree emerged a woman. She was tall, draped in silk that seemed woven from shadow and time. Her face was hidden behind a porcelain mask, cracked down the center. One of her eyes glowed blue. The other, gold. You've seen the Emperor, she said. He called me air, Cassius replied. He called me flame. The oracle walked slowly across the water. Her footsteps left ripples that echoed like chimes. Because you are his. Not by blood, but by choice. I chose nothing. Your past self did. The gatekeeper. The one who burned memory into history and crowned a tyrant as salvation. Cassius's throat tightened. Tell me the truth, he said. All of it. The oracle placed a hand upon the tree. The eyes opened. And memory spilled into the chamber like smoke. A younger Cassius, dressed in crimson robes, bearing no name, no title, stood in a sanctum of fire and mirrors. At his side knelt a man, powerful, proud, yet afraid. The Emperor. They're coming for me, the Emperor said. Then let them, gatekeeper Cassius replied. They want my soul. My name. My death. Then we'll give them your death. And keep your soul. How? We'll bind it. Not to the body. Not to a tomb. To a memory. To an idea. You'll become the story. The myth. The shadow that survives its own grave. Will I remember? Only what serves the gate. The vision twisted. The gate opened above the city. Flames rained from the sky. 1,000 souls were burned into silence. And in the center of it all, the Emperor, now crowned, now remembered into power eternal. Back in the chamber, Cassius fell to his knees. It was me, he said, hollow. I made him immortal. No, the oracle said gently. You made him unforgettable. Aelia knelt beside him. He was never sealed in death. He was sealed in the story. That's why the Empire can't forget him. That's why the gate chose him. Cassius looked up. Then how do we stop him? The oracle reached into the water and pulled out a scroll. Its parchment shimmered between real and not. This is the Emperor's name. His true one. Forgotten by all. Even himself. Why does that matter? Because to unmake a myth, you must unname it. Speak this name in the throne chamber, before the final seal breaks. She handed him the scroll. It burned his fingers. But beware, she said. To speak a forgotten name is to invite what it was meant to bury. Thunder echoed above the mountain. The third seal had cracked. Far away, the Emperor stirred in his tomb, eyes now fully open. And somewhere in the broken shadows of memory, Vale Acros smiled. He knew what the name was. And he intended to speak it first.
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.